The hallways of Northwood High School in the suburbs of Portland, Oregon, had never felt longer than they did now for Anya Vance. For months, Finn, Silas, and Reese had pushed the line, mocking her, taunting her between classes, turning her wheelchair into the punchline of a joke no one dared to stop. She was an easy target, a black girl navigating a sudden disability, surrounded by people who stayed quiet. They crossed the line more than once. And then one day they didn't just cross it, they shattered it. But what they didn't know was that someone had been watching. Lena Vance was Anya's older sister and an amateur mixed martial artist with no tolerance for cruelty and no fear of consequences. What happened next couldn't be buried. Finn, Silas, and Reese thought they could get away with it, but Lena wasn't going to let them. Not without making them suffer the same way they made her sister suffer. Anya Vance used to weave through the hallways like everyone else, slipping between bodies, shoulders back, head high, her earbuds tucked in her mind already halfway home. But that version of her, the girl who could outrun the clock and take stairs 2 at a time, was gone. What remained moved slower now, smaller, quieter, tucked low in a wheelchair that creaked a little when she turned corners, a chair she was still learning to trust, even though it was all she had. Students passed her like she didn't exist, or worse, like she was something to pity. Eyes dropped when she looked up. Conversation stopped when she wheeled too close, and though no one said it out loud, Anya felt it in every sideways glance and forced smile, that she didn't belong in the flow anymore. She was in the way, in the middle of someone else's space, in the middle of a life that had moved on without her. Only Lena never made her feel that way. Her sister was in the grade above, but she walked Anya to class when she could, doubled back during lunch, and kept a quiet eye from across the courtyard. When they weren't together, she didn't say much. Lena never did. But when she looked at Anya, it was like everything was still okay. Like Anya was still who she used to be, even if the rest of the world refused to see it. They'd always been close, but since the accident that had left Anya unable to walk, that closeness had turned into something else entirely. Something that carried weight. Something with fire in it. Lena had been there when Anya came home from the hospital. Saw her cry in the middle of the night when the reality settled in. Helped her up the first time she fell out of the chair. Held her hand through the silence that came after. The pity faded and the whispers started. She never made a show of protecting her sister, but everyone knew not to test that line. At least most people did. There were others, ones who watched Anya a little too closely when Lena wasn't around. Ones who saw the chair not as a boundary to respect, but an opening to exploit. Finn. Silas and Reese weren't new faces. They had been cruel before the accident, but back then it was surface-level taunts, background noise that never stuck, because Anya could walk away. Now she couldn't walk at all, and that had changed the game. They hadn't come full force yet, but their presence had grown louder lately. They lurked behind lockers. They snickered when she passed. Silas once brushed past her wheel and whispered, "You look better sitting down anyway." Finn had dropped a crumpled napkin in her lap one morning and smirked like it was the funniest thing in the world. No one stopped them, no one even looked. Anya didn't tell Lena, not because she didn't want to, but because she already knew what Lena would do, and she wasn't ready for that. Not yet. Her sister's temper wasn't wild or loud, but when it broke like steel. Clean final. Lena had never been suspended in her life, but there was a quiet edge to her that made people think twice. Still, Anya wasn't ready to be the reason her sister crossed that line, so she stayed silent, and each day the silence made her smaller. Most mornings blurred together now. Wake up early, struggle through the routine ride quietly with Lena to school, and brace herself for what the day might bring. There was no rhythm to it. Not anymore, just moments stitched together by effort. Each one survived, but never easy. It wasn't that Anya had no friends. She used to have plenty. But since the accident, they had slipped away, some fast and some slow, like water draining through cracks she hadn't known were there. The girl she used to laugh with at lunch now offered her soft looks from across the room. The kind people gave when they didn't know what to say and didn't want to say the wrong thing. A few texted her after she came back. Most didn't. No one said anything cruel to her face, but no one stood between her and the ones who did either. And lately Finn and his friends had stopped pretending. It started with the names Wheels Pity Case Floor Crawler. They tossed them like darts in the hallway, always just loud enough to catch her ear, but quiet enough that no teacher could be sure. They'd brush too close behind her chair, slap the backrest like it was a joke, or bump the foot pedals with their shoes so the whole frame jolted forward. One time, Reese pretended to trip and sent her backpack skidding across the floor, then made a big show of laughing when she had to ask someone else to pick it up. No one helped. No one even asked if she was okay. She'd learned not to cry at school, at least not where they could see her, but the shame settled into her chest like a stone. Lena could sense something was off, even though Anya said nothing. Her older sister's eyes would linger longer at the cafeteria door, scanning for any sign of tension. She watched who stood near Anya's locker. She noticed how her sister held her arms tighter around herself, and how her answers came shorter, with less and less of the warmth she used to have. But Lena didn't push. Not yet. She gave Anya space, assuming she'd speak when she was ready. Then came the assembly. It was one of those mandatory events where the entire school squeezed into the gym, rows of folding chairs lined up across the polished hardwood, the smell of sweat and dust clinging to the air. No matter how clean the place looked, Anya didn't mind assemblies. They gave her a chance to blend in, to sit quietly without being noticed. But this one had a different tone. It was a day of remembrance, a proud annual display where community leaders spoke. Flags were waved, and the student body stood hand on heart while the national anthem echoed through the speakers. Lena had found her a seat near the front before leaving to join her own grade section. Anya sat in silence, her chair-locked hands resting on her lap. She watched the microphone hum with static as a vice principal introduced the guest speaker, then nodded along as the gym quieted and the first notes of the anthem began. People stood around her like a tide rising. She stayed seated. It wasn't that she meant anything by it. She couldn't stand, but in that moment all that mattered was how obvious it looked. Her head dipped, eyes staring down at her shoes as she tried to disappear into the seat. But it was too late. She'd already been seen. Finn's voice cut through the silence like a scratch on glass. "Oh no, respect for the flag," he said loud enough for heads to turn. "Come on, you could at least try to stand up." Laughter snuck in around the anthem's final notes. A few boys near the back chuckled. A teacher frowned, but did nothing. The music kept playing. The flag kept waving. Anya sat frozen. Silas joined in. "Maybe she just doesn't believe in America, or maybe she's just lazy." More laughter. Louder now. Finn cupped his hands around his mouth like he was leading a chant. Stand up, stand up, stand up. Oh. And with every word, her face burned hotter. Her chest tightened harder until the tears pushed forward and there was nothing she could do to stop them. She bit her lip, clenched her hands into fists on her lap, and kept her head down, hoping no one would notice, but they always did. Someone snapped a photo, someone else whispered something cruel behind her back. The anthem ended, and as everyone sat, the sound of her quiet sobs was just loud enough to carry. She didn't remember much of what the speaker said after that. She didn't look up, she didn't move, she just waited for the assembly to end, for the chairs to scrape back, for Lena to return. And when she did, Lena took one look at Anya's red eyes and trembling shoulders and didn't ask what happened. She just knelt beside the wheelchair and held her hand the entire walk back to class, but her jaw was clenched the whole way. And behind her eyes, something sharp had started to take shape. Lena didn't let go of Anya's hand the rest of the day, not even when she dropped her off at her last class. She stood just outside the doorway, arms crossed, jaw locked, her eyes scanning every student who passed like she was memorizing faces. When the final bell rang, she wheeled her sister to the car, herself skipping practice and brushing off texts with one-word replies. The silence between them on the ride home wasn't heavy. It was loaded. Anya stared out the window, her fingers curled around the strap of her backpack, watching the houses blur into a quiet stretch of road. The sun was already low, throwing long shadows across the dash. Lena hadn't turned the radio on. She didn't ask how the rest of the day went. She just drove one hand on the wheel, the other tapping slowly against her thigh. When they pulled into the driveway, Lena, didn't go inside. She popped the trunk, grabbed the ramp from the back, and unfolded it carefully. Anya waited until it was in place before rolling herself down. Not saying a word, she tried to head toward the front steps, but Lena stepped in front of her. "Who was it?" she asked, her voice calm. Too calm. The kind of calm that felt like the edge of a storm. Anya didn't answer. She didn't look up either. Lena crouched beside the chair, blocking her path, her expression unreadable, but her eyes locked in. "You're crying in front of a gym full of people, and you expect me not to ask." Anya shook her head slowly. It was nothing. Lena didn't move. "Don't do that. I said it's fine," Anya muttered, but the words didn't carry any strength behind them. Lena leaned in closer. "You think I didn't see your face after that assembly? You think I didn't hear them laughing?" Anya flinched. "It doesn't matter." "Yes, it does," Lena said, her voice tightening. "It matters if someone's hurting you. It matters if you're walking around holding it all in while they get to pretend like nothing happened." Anya looked away. Her fingers were trembling now. "You can't fix everything." "I know that," Lena replied, "but I can fix this if you just tell me who—" "No." Anya cut in sharper than she meant to. "Because if I tell you, you're going to lose it. You're going to get in trouble, and then I'll be alone." The words came out fast. And once they did, she hated how small they made her sound. But it was true. The fear of being without her sister, of sitting alone in that building while those same boys laughed behind her back and pushed her chair for fun. It was heavier than anything else she carried. Lena had always been the shield. Without her, there was no protection. There was just her, and the silence, and the chair. Lena didn't answer right away. She stood slowly, jaw tight, arms folding across her chest as she looked down at her sister. The frustration on her face wasn't aimed at Anya. It was directed somewhere else entirely, somewhere far away, but coming closer every day. "I'm not going anywhere," she said quietly. Not as a promise, but as a statement carved from stone. "But you can't keep this to yourself. It's not safe." Anya nodded. But it wasn't agreement. It was just a way to end the conversation. Lena stepped aside and let her through. She watched as Anya struggled with the front door, the ramp just a little too steep, the wheels slipping once before she caught herself. Lena didn't help this time. She just stood there and watched, her heart pulled tight. Her fists curled slightly at her sides. She knew her sister was hiding something, and whatever it was getting worse. That night, Anya didn't eat much. She picked at her dinner and left half of it on the plate. Lena stayed up late, sitting in her room, with the lights off, phone face down on the bed, staring at nothing. She wasn't angry at Anya. She was angry at what the world had done to her, at how quickly people had changed when her sister stopped walking, at how easy it was for cruelty to slip into the cracks and hide there, just out of reach. But Lena wasn't going to let it hide much longer. Whether Anya told her or not, she was going to find out. The sky over Northwood High was overcast, the air thick with the kind of chill that clung to the skin long after the wind had passed, and Anya rolled herself across the side entrance near the gym, while most students filtered in through the front. It was a habit now, avoiding the larger crowds, the shoulder bumps, the awkward pity stares. The side door was quieter, less chance of running into anyone who'd make her day worse. Or so she thought. She made it to her locker, spinning the dial carefully, her fingers stiff from the cold. The hallway was still half empty, filled with the low echo of shoes and murmurs bouncing off the walls. She thought she'd make it through this morning without incident. Lena was already inside handling something for student council, but she was supposed to meet her before second period. Anya had told herself she'd be fine. It was just 1 hour, one hallway, one morning. She didn't hear them coming. The first sign was the sound of laughter, low at first, then rising like a wave just before it breaks. She didn't even have time to react before Finn's hand slapped the back of her chair. "Hey, there she is." "Captain, sit down," he said, smirking as he leaned over her shoulder. Anya tensed. Her hand froze on the lock. She kept her eyes down, hoping if she didn't engage, they'd go away. But they didn't. Silas stepped in front of her, walking backward as she rolled forward. "Where's your flag pin?" Thought you'd come in with a protest sign today, he said, flashing a wide, mocking grin. Or maybe a wheelchair bumper sticker that says, Down with America. Reese laughed from behind. Nah, she's too lazy to print one out. Besides, she'd have to get up to do that. More laughter. Anya tried to swerve around Silas, but he stepped to the side again, blocking her. Finn walked up alongside her and grabbed the right wheel. Come on, just having some fun, he said, his grip tightening. This thing's built like a shopping cart. I bet I could pop a wheelie. Anya's chest tightened. Don't, she said, her voice soft but sharp. Oh, you hear that? Reese said. She's got a voice. Thought you left that in the hospital. Before she could react, Finn unlocked the brake, and then, without warning, they lifted. Her world shifted sideways as the chair jolted beneath her. One of them grabbing the handles from behind the other, pulling at the frame. Her body slid slightly unbalanced. She gripped the armrests tight, trying to stay steady, but her center of gravity was off. She couldn't fight them. Not like this. They weren't laughing anymore. They were performing now. Silas yanked the chair fully out from under her. Her legs collapsed instantly, limp and unresponsive, her body hitting the cold floor hard. The tiles were cold, her palms scraped as she tried to catch herself. The impact wasn't loud, but it echoed through her chest like thunder. She gasped, her face burning pain and shame, twisting together inside her as the boys cheered. Finn hopped into the wheelchair and spun it in a lazy circle, making car sounds with his mouth. Vroom, vroom, out of my way. Coming through. Silas leaned against the lockers, filming with his phone. Yo, this is gold. Anya, you want your seat back? Say please. She looked up, her arms trembling beneath her, her knees useless on the cold tile. Give it back, she said, but it came out cracked, thin, like air that didn't have strength behind it. Reese nudged the chair with his foot. She can't even crawl, right? Maybe we should race her down the hall. They kept laughing. People started to gather. A few watched, unsure if it was a joke or something worse. Most turned and walked faster. Anya's heart raced. Her vision blurred. She wanted to scream, to grab the chair to run, but she couldn't do any of it. She wasn't fast, she wasn't strong, and in that moment on the ground with her elbows burning and her stomach twisted in panic, she wasn't even seen. She was just something to point at. Finn leaned back in the chair, spinning it again. I got to admit, he said, laughing, it's kind of fun being you. And that was when the noise stopped. Not because they were done, but because someone else had arrived. Footsteps echoed from the end of the hall, heavy and fast, cutting through the scene like a blade. The students who had stopped to watch began backing away, their laughter dying quickly. The chair squeaked to a stop as Finn turned toward the sound. And there she was, Lena. She wasn't running. She didn't need to. She walked down the hall like gravity didn't apply to her. Eyes locked on Anya, then shifting to the chair, then finally to the three boys frozen in place. Her face said nothing, but her eyes said everything. And for the first time that morning, Anya breathed. Lena didn't break stride as she approached. Her steps echoed through the corridor like a warning, each one heavier than the last. The laughter had already died, but the silence it left behind was louder, sharper, filled with a tension that wrapped itself around every student, watching from the corners of the hallway. She moved past them like they weren't even there. Her focus was locked dead ahead. Anya was on the floor, her arms shaking as she tried to lift herself, and her chair was spinning in lazy circles beneath Finn, who was leaning back like he was still king of something. Silas stood with his phone raised halfway. No longer recording, but still gripping it, like he didn't know what else to do with his hands. Reese leaned on a locker, his smirk just beginning to crack. Lena didn't look confused. She didn't look panicked. She looked calm. Too calm. Finn chuckled nervously when she reached them, trying to climb out of the chair with a weak grin. Hey, relax, it's just a joke. We were just messing around. Lena didn't blink. Get out of her chair.
Nah.
Finn hesitated, his voice trying to sound casual, but his bravado was already thinning. She was fine. All right. We didn't hurt her or anything. We were giving it back. I said, Lena repeated, her voice low and even. Get out of her chair. Silas stepped forward, trying to fill the space with noise. Nobody touched her. We didn't even push her that hard. Lena cut her eyes toward him. You dropped her on the floor and laughed, Reese scoffed. She can't feel it anyway, right? That did it? Lena's hand moved before anyone could speak. She grabbed Finn by the front of his jacket and yanked him out of the wheelchair, so fast his legs tangled beneath him. He stumbled, and before he could find his footing, she slammed him backward against the lockers with a metallic crash that turned heads down the entire hall. He gasped, but she didn't let go. She drove her knee into his stomach once hard, and as he doubled over, coughing, she dropped him to the ground. Silas lunged at her, but she turned on instinct, catching his wrist mid-swing and twisting it behind his back so sharply he screamed. You touch her again, she hissed, and I'll break something you do feel. He thrashed, trying to swing with his free hand, but she ducked the wild punch and swept his legs out from under him. He hit the floor hard, his head snapping against the tile with a dull thud. He groaned, clutching his shoulder, but she was already turning. Reese charged at her from the side, yelling, trying to grab her in a full tackle. Lena barely stepped back in time. His momentum sent them both stumbling. They crashed into a row of lockers, the sound booming like thunder. She twisted, trying to break free, but he had a grip on her hoodie, now dragging her sideways. You think you're tough, he barked. You think you can come in here? And she drove her elbow into his ribs once, then again, and when his arms loosened, she spun, grabbing the front of his shirt and throwing him across the hallway. He hit the ground hard, rolling once before slamming into the base of a trophy case. Glass cracked. A cheerleader's photo inside the frame rattled loose. By now, students had backed far away, but no one had left. No teachers had arrived. Phones were out again, not to stop the fight, but to capture every second of it. It wasn't just a fight anymore. It was something else entirely. Something that had been building for days, weeks, maybe even longer. Lena's chest rose and fell fast, her fists still clenched as she took in the scene. Silas wheezing on the floor, clutching his wrist, Reese groaning by the broken glass, Finn crawling toward a backpack, spitting curses under his breath. You're going to regret this, he snarled. You think just 'cause you can throw a punch? Lena walked toward him slowly. I'm not throwing punches, she said flatly. I'm delivering consequences. He lunged from the floor, trying to surprise her with a blind tackle, but she sidestepped it, grabbing his arm mid-motion and twisting him mid-air. He crashed down on his side with a pained yell. She didn't stop. She grabbed the back of his jacket and dragged him a few feet, like he weighed nothing, tossing him hard against the lockers again. This is for pushing her, she said, and as he slid down the metal, she kicked his ribs. This is for laughing. Another kick. This is for recording it. He tried to speak, but nothing came out. She turned, stepping toward Silas, who was scrambling up now with a broken look in his eyes. You want to finish this? She asked. He shook his head. Too late. She grabbed him and slammed him against the locker next to Finn, then kneed him. Once stepped back and hit him with a clean right hook that sent him slumping. She didn't yell, she didn't curse. Her silence was worse. Her eyes stayed cold, but even she didn't see Reese coming up behind her, and the fight wasn't over yet. Reese rose behind her with blood on his lip and fury in his eyes. He didn't charge this time. He pounced, wrapping both arms around Lena's waist and yanking her backward with everything he had. She lost her footing, crashing into the ground with him, on top, his elbows striking the side of her head in the fall. For a second, everything jarred sideways, noise, color, movement blurring around her. He tried to pin her arms down, growling through clenched teeth, spitting out curses like they were spitfire. You think you're some kind of hero, he snapped. You're just another thug, just another... Lena twisted under him, forcing her knee between them, gritting through the pressure until she found her angle. She shoved upward, grunting with the effort, then rolled, reversing their position with raw force. Her elbow came down into his jaw once hard, then again snapping his head to the side. She grabbed his shirt and slammed the back of his head into the floor. Once, then, twice. The impact echoed, and for a moment everything else seemed to stop. Blood ran from his mouth now, dark and fast, and when she stood, he didn't follow. Silas crawled toward a hallway exit, dragging himself across the tile. With one arm, his face dazed, his breathing shallow, Finn tried to grab a metal broom from the janitor's bucket. Someone had left near the lockers, but his hands were shaking too badly. He swung it once blindly, and the end of the handle clipped Lena's shoulder. She didn't flinch. She turned, and Finn froze, still crouched, holding the broom like it would save him. Lena stepped forward and slapped it from his hand so fast it clattered to the floor before he even blinked. She grabbed him by the collar and lifted him halfway off the ground. "You humiliated my sister," she said, her voice low and sharp. "You dragged her out of her chair. You laughed. You recorded it. You let her lie on the floor while you played with the only thing that gives her freedom. You think I'm crazy?" He nodded, fast, wide-eyed tears brimming now. "You're right." She punched him, not wild, not unhinged, just one clean hit to the face that snapped his head back and left him limp in her grip. She let go, and he dropped to the floor like a dropped coat. By now, the hallway looked like something out of a riot. Lockers dented, backpacks, scattered, blood smeared on the floor, students still circling the edges, phones still raised, mouths covered in disbelief. A few had backed behind the corners, whispering to others down the connecting halls. Some stood frozen with their hands over their mouths, but none of them said a word, and still not a single adult arrived. Lena turned slowly, taking one long breath. Her arms were scraped, her hoodie torn at the shoulder, a trickle of blood near her temple from where Reese had slammed her. She winced as she rolled her neck, her ribs throbbing from the fall, but she stayed upright. Her eyes scanned the hallway once more, as if daring anyone else to speak. No one did. Then she moved to her sister. Anya was still half sitting, half sagging against the lockers. She hadn't cried again, not yet, but her body was shaking. Her eyes locked on the wreckage around her. She'd watched the entire thing, every punch, every fall, every word. Lena crouched beside her, her voice soft for the first time. "Come here." Anya didn't speak, but she leaned into her. Lena's hands were careful as she slid her arms under her sister's back and legs lifting her slowly off the cold tile, holding her like something precious that had been dropped one too many times. She stepped around the broken glass, the fallen boys, the stairs. The chair sat tipped near the trophy case, one wheel spinning idly. Lena sat Anya down carefully, adjusting the footrests, checking her sleeves, brushing her hair back like she used to when they were little. She didn't ask if she was okay. She knew she wasn't, but she was safe now. That mattered more. The first adult finally appeared at the far end of the hall, running. Lena didn't look up. She placed one hand on the back of the chair and started pushing. Her knuckles were bruised, her clothes torn. Her breath still coming fast, but her grip on that chair, steady and unshakable. Lena didn't say anything as she pushed her sister down the hallway. The wreckage of the fight stretched behind them. Bodies groaning, lockers, dented blood drying on the tile, but she didn't look back. She didn't check to see who was watching, or filming, or whispering behind their hands. All that mattered was the weight in the chair and the silence that clung to it. Anya hadn't spoken since the last punch landed. Her hands were clenched in her lap, knuckles white. Eyes unfocused, shoulders trembling in a way that told Lena the adrenaline was still fading, that her sister was holding back something. She couldn't keep buried for long. Lena slowed near the end of the hall and leaned over her, slightly crouching beside her again, even though every bruise and muscle screamed not to. She placed a hand gently on Anya's wrist. "Hey," she whispered, "it's over. I'm here." And that was when the wall cracked. Anya's shoulders heaved once, a sharp breath breaking out of her chest as the dam gave way. Her lips curled inward as she tried to stop it, but the tears came too fast, too full. She turned into her sister's arms and buried her face against Lena's shoulder, clutching the front of her hoodie like it was the only thing keeping her from falling apart completely. Lena held her held her like she had in the hospital room that first night, after the accident when Anya had woken up screaming terrified at the stillness in her legs, held her like she had in the hallway outside the bathroom when a teacher had barked at her for being late, not even noticing she couldn't get the stall door open, held her like she was trying to shield her from a world that kept forgetting how to treat her like a person. The tears soaked through Lena's sleeve, hot and sharp. Anya's whole body trembled, and the sound of her crying wasn't loud, but it carried deep and broken, like something old was being torn open. "I tried," Anya whispered between sobs. "I really tried to ignore it. I thought I could just wait it out." Lena didn't say, "I know." She didn't say, "It's okay." She just pulled her tighter, her chin resting against the top of Anya's head, her hand rubbing slow circles across her back. "You don't have to wait anymore," she said quietly. "They won't touch you again." Anya sobbed harder, and Lena stayed right there, bruised and bleeding and calm now, because the only thing that mattered was the girl in her arms. Footsteps came from behind them, steady and deliberate. More than one pair, not rushed but not casual either. Lena turned her head slightly, still shielding Anya with her body, as two campus security officers approached from the main hallway. One of them held a radio in his hand, the other already reaching for the walkie clipped to his chest. They stopped a few feet away, giving the sisters space, but their posture left no doubt about why they were there. "Lena Vance," one of them said. Lena didn't move. The officer cleared his throat. "We need both of you to come with us. The principal wants to speak with you immediately." Anya tensed again, her arms clutched tighter around her sister's waist. Lena looked up slowly, locking eyes with the man in front of her. His voice hadn't been aggressive, but it hadn't carried any understanding either. Just procedure, just protocol. Lena stood without a word, adjusting her grip on the wheelchair. Her expression didn't change. She didn't argue. She didn't ask why. She just nodded once, then looked down at Anya and whispered, "We're going together." And with that, she turned the chair and followed the officers down the hall. Wherever this was heading, they would face it side by side. The main office was too clean. That was the first thing Anya noticed when they wheeled inside. The floor gleamed under the fluorescent lights. The walls lined with laminated posters about school pride and zero-tolerance policies, as if any of that had ever protected her from what happened just minutes ago. The silence inside felt colder than the hallway they'd just come from, and somehow heavier too, like whatever was about to be said had already been decided. Long before they stepped through the door. Lena didn't speak. Her breathing had slowed, but her hands still twitched, now and then, like her body hadn't quite come down from everything. It had just done. The security guards didn't say a word either. They led them through the front office past curious glances from staff and to a frosted glass door near the back. One of them knocked twice, then opened it. "Come in." Lena pushed Anya forward into the room. Principal Harrison sat behind the desk, flanked by Vice Principal Davies, whose glasses sat crooked on the bridge of his nose and whose expression was unreadable. Both men looked serious, not shaken, not surprised, just settled. Like this conversation was a formality. Lena stood straight, hands at her sides, eyes level. Anya sat quietly beside her. Trying to disappear into the cushion of her chair, Harrison adjusted a file on his desk. "Lena Vance," he said. "Do you understand why you're here?" Lena's reply was flat. "Because I stopped 3 boys from attacking my sister." Harrison nodded slowly, as if weighing his next words. "We've reviewed video recordings from students and taken statements from staff and the students involved. I won't deny that what happened to Anya is serious. However," Davies cut in, "however, your response was violent, prolonged. Several students have already left campus with injuries requiring medical attention. One may have a broken rib. 2 others are concussed." Lena didn't blink. "They're lucky, that's all." Harrison leaned forward slightly, elbows on the desk. "That's exactly the problem. We cannot have students taking matters into their own hands, no matter what the reason is."
My.
They dragged her out of her chair, Lena said, her voice rising slightly. They left her on the floor like trash, and I'm the problem. There's a line, Davies replied firmly, and you crossed it. Lena's hands curled into fists. Because I did something you wouldn't. Harrison gave her a long, measured look, then glanced at the folder again. We've made our decision. Effective immediately, you are expelled from this school. The words landed like a weight in the room. Anya turned eyes wide, mouth opening like she was about to protest, but no sound came out. She looked at Lena, waiting for her to respond, to argue, to push back. And Lena did. She stepped forward, voice tight with fury. You're serious. You're throwing me out while the three of them get to limp home, spin their story, and come back tomorrow like nothing happened? They're being disciplined, Harrison replied stiffly, pending further review. But we can't ignore the damage done. You used excessive force because you never lifted a finger to stop them, Lena shot back. You ignored the warnings. You ignored her complaints. You ignored her, so I stopped waiting. This isn't about your sister anymore, Davies said sharply. This is about you. Lena gave a bitter laugh, stepping back, shaking her head. No, this has always been about her. You just don't want to admit how fast you looked the other way. Harrison stood. You'll leave the school grounds immediately. Your parents have been notified. Security will escort you out. Anya's voice finally cracked through the tension. No, wait. Lena turned to her. For a moment, the anger dropped from her face, replaced by something else. Something hollow. I'll be fine, she said softly, crouching again to meet her sister's eyes. But you need to keep your head up now. Anya's chest was tight, her breath catching. I don't want you to go. I know, Lena whispered, her voice breaking just slightly. But they're scared of strength. That's why they're doing this. You just make sure they stay scared of yours. One of the security guards stepped inside the room. Time to go. Lena stood up slowly. She looked once more at the two men behind the desk, both of whom had turned their attention back to their papers, as if what had just happened didn't need further discussion. Then she walked out, and with every step she took, Anya felt the fear sink deeper, because the one person who had always been there, who had always stood between her and the worst the world could offer, was gone now, and the school hadn't changed. Only the hallway had. The house was quiet when they got home. Too quiet. Their mother wasn't back from work yet, and the usual background noise, the television humming low in the living room, the gentle clatter of dishes, the sound of someone moving from one room to another, was missing. Only the distant tick of the hallway clock filled the silence as Lena helped Anya up the ramp and through the front door. Careful not to jostle the chair too hard, Anya didn't say much, and Lena didn't push her either. She just rolled her sister to the middle of the living room and crouched in front of her, resting her arms on Anya's knees, breathing slowly, her eyes searching her sister's face for something solid to hold on to. Anya looked away. Lena followed her gaze. They sat there for a while like that, the afternoon sun spilling across the carpet, catching the specks of dust that drifted lazily through the air. Outside, someone's dog barked. A car door slammed down the street. The world kept moving, but inside, everything still felt like it was standing still. Lena finally broke the silence. Her voice was soft, but not tired. I'm sorry. Anya blinked. What? I promised I'd protect you, Lena said, her head lowered. And now I'm not allowed within 50 feet of your school. Anya shook her head, her throat tightening. You didn't do anything wrong. Lena looked up again. Didn't I beat the hell out of 3 kids, Anya. I gave them bruises and blood and reasons to spin the story however they want. Now I'm the violent one, the angry one, the one they'll say snapped, and you're still stuck in there with them. Anya didn't answer right away. Her hands were folded tightly in her lap, her shoulders tense. She looked so small in that chair sometimes, Lena thought. Not because of her body, but because of everything she'd been forced to carry alone. Things no one her age should have to. I'm scared, Anya whispered. Lena didn't say anything. I'm scared they're going to come after me again, she continued. Scared I won't be able to stop them, that they'll find some way to hurt me worse, and now you're not there. No one is. Lena moved closer, sitting down cross-legged on the carpet, knees touching the footrests. That's not true. They didn't believe you, Anya said. You saw what happened. They made it like you were the problem. And if they could do that to you, what do you think they'll do to me when I go back? Lena leaned back slightly, exhaling through her nose. They can lie in a meeting, she said. They can hide behind desks, but they can't lie to the world. Anya looked at her confused. Lena's voice steadied. The video. The one Silas took, the one the school pretended not to have. They deleted it from his phone, but I saw 3 other kids recording. One of them posted a clip already, just a few seconds, but it shows you on the floor. Shows them spinning the chair. I screenshotted it before it got taken down. Anya's brow furrowed. You think someone else has the whole thing? I know they do, Lena said, and even if they don't, we have enough already to tell the truth. Anya hesitated. And do what? Show it to Harrison. He already made up his mind. Lena shook her head. Not him, everyone else. She stood up, went to her bag by the door, and pulled out her phone. Then she brought it back and placed it gently in Anya's hands. You're going to post it. Anya stared down at the screen. Me, they expect you to stay quiet, Lena said. They expect you to cry in the corner. Wait for some weak apology. Maybe get an extra hall monitor for a week. But if this comes from you, if people see your face, hear your voice, they won't be able to ignore it. Not this time. Anya's grip tightened around the phone. Her voice shook. I don't know if I can. What if it just makes things worse? Lena knelt down again, leveling her gaze. Then we fight harder. She pulled her own phone out and opened a folder. Photo screenshots the short video, her notes on the boys' names, a log of every incident Anya had mentioned over the last month, pieced together in careful, quiet rage. We'll post the clip with a caption, just a few lines, then tag the local news station, the district office, the Disability Rights Foundation, maybe even the city's community group. People will see it, and once they do, they'll start asking questions. Harrison doesn't want to answer. Anya's eyes were glassy, but her voice didn't shake this time. And then what? Lena reached out and placed her hand over Anya's. Then we make sure the world hears what they tried to bury. And for the first time all day, Anya nodded, without hesitation. They didn't sleep much that night. Lena sat on the edge of her bed with her laptop open, fingers typing and retouching the post over and over again, while Anya lay curled on her side in the chair beside her. A blanket wrapped around her legs, eyes wide open, and unfocused as if staring into the future they had just set in motion. They picked the cleanest footage they had. One of the students who had filmed from across the hallway had sent it through anonymously. No name, no comment, just the raw file. It was longer than the first clip, shaky but clear. The entire hallway could be seen. Anya on the floor, Finn spinning the chair, Silas laughing, Reese walking away like it was all harmless. No audio manipulation, no cuts, just the truth playing out in real time. Lena added subtitles and blurred the crowd to protect the others who hadn't said a word, but might now claim they wanted to help. The caption was short, a few sentences, nothing dramatic. This is what they did to my sister. She's disabled. She asked them to stop. They didn't. I was expelled for defending her. They're still enrolled. Please share this before they make it disappear again. They posted it in the early hours of the morning. Anya Hua hit the upload button herself, her finger hovering for half a second before tapping the screen. Her face was calm, not numb, but focused, like she had finally found a thread she could pull and refused to let go. Lena posted the same video on her account. They both tagged every local outlet, every organization they could think of. It was quiet at first. A few likes, a few retweets, a comment or two, nothing big. But by the time the sun rose and the sky began to pale behind the blinds, the numbers had already started to climb. A video share from a student with a large following brought the first wave. Then a disability advocate reposted it with a sharp caption about how systems protect bullies over victims. A local journalist followed, then another. Within hours, people from across the city were commenting, tagging the school district, demanding answers. Lena sat Lena sat beside Anya at the kitchen table, scrolling silently through the reactions. Some were angry, some were heartbroken, some were outraged in ways that felt like justice finally reaching its feet. Anya said little. She just kept watching the view count rise. By midday, it had passed 100,000. By evening, local news anchors were mentioning it on the air, reading statements from the district about an ongoing investigation and a review of the incident involving several students. But those words didn't carry much weight anymore. The video had already done what it needed to. The damage couldn't be softened. Their inboxes filled quickly. Messages from strangers, teachers from other schools, parents of kids in wheelchairs who had lived through the same silence. Some thanked them, some offered help. One civil rights attorney asked if they had already begun preparing legal action. Lena flagged that message immediately. But the most telling shift came when the principal's office called. The number popped up on their mother's phone. While she was chopping vegetables in the kitchen, her back still turned, still unaware of everything that had exploded online. Lena answered, "Vance." Harrison said, his voice clipped but tight with strain. "We'd like to schedule a meeting at your earliest convenience to discuss the current matter." Lena didn't respond right away. She let the silence hang for a moment, just long enough to feel the weight shift back into her hands. "Sure," she said. "We'll be in touch, but next time send an email. My sister doesn't need to hear your voice." She hung up before he could respond. Later that night, Anya stared at the screen as the video hit 500,000 views. Her hand drifted toward the keyboard, pausing over the words people had written about her. Brave, strong, resilient. She didn't feel brave. She didn't feel strong. But she felt seen, and that was more than she'd ever had inside those school walls. Across from her, Lena leaned back in her chair, arms folded behind her head, watching the numbers keep climbing. The fight wasn't over, not even close, but the tide was turning. And for the first time since it began, it was the bullies who would have to answer, not them. By the next morning, the school couldn't pretend anymore. Emails flooded the district's inbox. The voicemail box for the front office filled before noon. News vans parked across the street from the school entrance, their antennas rising over rows of parked cars. Cameras pointed toward students as they walked inside, hoping to catch someone willing to talk. And while the staff did their best to keep a lid on it, ushering students inside, quickly instructing teachers not to discuss the video in class, it was already too late. The damage had reached the surface. Everyone had seen it. Everyone had opinions, and no one believed the school anymore. In classrooms, students whispered during lectures, phones hidden beneath desks, fingers tapping through the endless stream of reposts, comments, and stitched videos, breaking down every second of the footage. Some spoke in low voices about how they'd seen things before, how Finn, Silas, and Reese always acted like nothing could touch them. A few even admitted quietly that they'd laughed at the time. They didn't laugh anymore. By mid-morning, a second video surfaced, this one from a different angle, showing the moments just before the assault, the way Anya had tried to wheel away, the way Finn had stepped in front of her, the smirk on his face when he leaned into the handles and unlocked the brakes. It wasn't just bullying anymore. It looked like assault. That afternoon, Lena and Anya were called into a meeting at the district office. This time, it wasn't just Harrison and Davies behind a desk. It was a panel representatives from the superintendent's office, a school board liaison, a district legal advisor, and one silent woman from the Department of Equity and Inclusion who said nothing. The entire meeting but took notes with a pen that never stopped moving. They sat in a quiet, windowless conference room, the walls lined with framed photos of smiling graduates and group shots from outdated school events. The contrast between those images and the tension in the room was sharp enough to taste. Harrison was there too, but he didn't lead the conversation. Lena did. She came with notes, names, timelines, incident logs, screenshots of comments, quotes from teachers who had witnessed things but never acted. She laid everything out in calm, measured words, her voice never shaking her posture, never folding. And beside her, Anya sat still in her chair, silent but present. Her eyes focused on every person at the table like she was seeing through the polished wood and rehearsed sympathy. "You expelled me for protecting my sister." Lena said, her voice even. And you let her walk back into that school the next day with the same boys who pulled her out of her chair. You didn't review footage. You didn't speak to her. You didn't do anything except punish the person who made you look bad. One of the board members shifted uncomfortably. We understand that mistakes were made, and we're conducting a full review. You're not reviewing anything, Lena interrupted, her voice rising slightly. You're reacting because you got caught, because the world saw what you refused to see. The silence afterward was thick and long. Then the legal advisor spoke. We've reviewed the footage and documentation provided. We've also spoken to additional students. Based on the full scope of the incident, the district is issuing an official apology to both Anya and Lena Vance. The expulsion will be reversed immediately, and the disciplinary actions against the other students are being re-evaluated. Lena leaned back slowly, her hands folded across her lap. Re-evaluated isn't good enough. The board member cleared her throat. We're in the process of formal expulsion hearings for all 3 students involved. And what about the staff who ignored the warnings? Lena asked. We've opened an internal review, the legal advisor said. And we are revisiting our training programs for disability awareness and intervention. It wasn't everything, not yet. But it was the first time anyone in that room had acknowledged what happened in full. Anya didn't speak during the meeting, but when it ended and the room began to clear, the woman from Equity and Inclusion stood beside her and said, They only move this fast when they're afraid. And for the first time since it started, Anya smiled. It wasn't big, it wasn't long, but it was real. Outside the building, reporters stood, waiting, microphones in hand, cameras rolling, and this time Lena didn't flinch when they called her name. She stepped in front of the lenses with her chin high, Anya by her side, and spoke with the same clarity she had in that meeting. She didn't rage, she didn't cry, she just told the truth. And when the story aired that night on every local channel across social media, through articles and interviews and panel discussions, the message was clear. They weren't just fighting back, they were winning. But that didn't last forever. It didn't take long for the pushback to start. By the end of the week, after the district issued its formal apology and confirmed that the expulsion against Lena had been rescinded, local talk radio began to shift. The tone was different now. Not all outrage and sympathy, but something quieter, more calculating. Callers framed their concerns in vague terms, their voices laced with hesitation, meant to sound fair. Now, I'm not saying what happened to that girl wasn't terrible, one man said on a popular morning segment. But I just wonder, at what point does violence go too far? I mean, that other girl sent 3 boys to the hospital. A mother chimed in later that day, her voice tight, controlled, the kind of tone used when someone rehearses every word before stepping in front of a microphone. My son, Silas, has never been a bully. He was caught in a moment. That girl had training. She's a fighter. Why isn't anyone asking if what she did was excessive? Others followed, letters to the editor, online comments under news stories. Carefully worded statements from the parents of the boys involved, crafted by lawyers and public relations coaches, and framed with language that danced around accountability. They didn't deny what happened. They didn't apologize for it either. They just redirected the spotlight away from their sons and onto Lena. A few of the articles began referring to her as the expelled MMA student. Rather than by name, anonymous sources mentioned her violent background. One blog claimed she'd attacked before, though no one could prove it. The implication was clear. Maybe Anya was a victim, but Lena, she was dangerous. Lena read every headline. She didn't flinch, but Anya noticed the way her sister stayed up later, now scrolling through articles on her phone, fingers clenched, jaw tight. She noticed how Lena stopped posting for a few days, how she pulled away when friends texted, how she said she was fine, but walked around like she was waiting for something else to hit her. It hit Anya harder because while Lena had always been the one who fought, who stood tall and took the heat, Anya knew the toll it took to be misunderstood by choice, to be turned into something ugly by people who never looked you in the eye. They were doing it again, just with bigger words, louder platforms, cleaner suits. At school, a few students started wearing red wristbands, a color tied to the varsity team, a quiet show of support for Finn and the others. A few muttered things in passing. One boy said, "Lena got lucky that she wasn't behind bars." Another laughed and said, "Anya should be thankful anyone talked to her at all." None of them touched her, but the air had changed. The principal sent out a memo reminding students to treat each other with compassion and to avoid taking sides during what he called a delicate and polarizing situation. Lena tore it off the bulletin board when she saw it and tossed it into the trash. "They want a clean ending," she told Anya that night. "They want it quiet, a nice little press conference, and a lesson learned, and everyone goes back to class like it never happened." Anya looked up at her. "But it did happen," Lena nodded. "That's why they're scared, because we're not letting them wrap it up." The next morning, a legal filing went public. Anya Vance versus the Northwood School District Board of Education. A civil suit alleging failure to protect a disabled student, willful negligence, and systemic inaction toward repeated harassment. The attorney who had messaged them after the first video had filed it on their behalf. Lena didn't speak during the press interview. She stood behind her sister, hands folded, face steady. Anya did the talking now, slowly, carefully, clearly. She told the room that it wasn't about revenge, that it wasn't about attention, that all she wanted was safety, fairness, and dignity, that she hadn't had those things since the moment her chair became a target. After the interview, reporters crowded around again. Some of them asked about the wristbands, about the new rumors, about the pushback from the boys' families. Anya answered the same way every time. "I can't walk away, so I won't back down either." And in that moment, even as the spin machines turned and the parents scrambled to protect their sons' images, it was clear that something had shifted for good. Because now it wasn't just Lena who fought. It was Anya too. It happened outside the district building 3 days after the lawsuit was filed. The weather had turned colder, the wind sharper around the edges, and the sky hung gray overhead, like it hadn't decided whether to rain or just make the city feel heavier. Anya and Lena had just finished a short meeting with their lawyer, updates nothing urgent, when they stepped outside into the small parking lot tucked behind the building. The cars were lined up tight, boxed between a chain-link fence and a row of sagging hedges. That's where she saw them. Finn and his father. The boy stood stiff near the passenger side of a black SUV, hands stuffed in the pockets of a varsity jacket he hadn't earned back yet. His face pale, but tight with something that looked like anger, stretched too thin to hold itself together. His father leaned against the hood of the car, tall and broad, a thick-necked man with salt and pepper stubble and a suit jacket, worn like armor. His arms were crossed, his jaw set hard. The kind of man used to getting his way with a voice raised in the right room. Lena slowed, but Anya didn't. She wheeled forward, not fast, not reckless, just steady, and when she came to a stop about 10 feet from them, she didn't flinch. Her hands rested lightly on the rims. Her expression was calm. Finn's father stepped forward first. "You think you're clever," he said. His voice flat, the kind of tone meant to fill space like pressure, dragging my son's name through the mud, spinning stories to ruin his future. "You think anyone's going to remember the truth after you've poisoned it this way?" Anya tilted her head, her eyes steady. "I'm not the one spinning anything." He took a step closer. "You don't understand what kind of damage you're doing." Behind him, Finn stayed silent. Lena moved closer, her posture guarded, every step measured, but Anya raised a hand gently, signaling her to hold back. Then she looked straight at Finn. "You brought your daddy to yell at me," she said. Her voice soft, but clear. "Wasn't brave enough to do it yourself." His eyes flickered. His father's expression hardened. "You're out of your depth, little girl." Anya smiled, slow and sharp. "I've been dragged across floors, left on the ground, mocked by people who thought I'd stay quiet forever, and I still came back. I'm not out of my depth, I'm just out of patience." He stepped closer. Lena moved to intercept, but Anya didn't move. "You think this is strength?" he asked, low and hard. Sitting in a chair behind a lawsuit, Anya's voice didn't waver. "No. I think strength is sitting in a chair and still making people like you nervous." For a moment, no one moved. Then Finn's father looked away just briefly, like the words had landed somewhere. He hadn't expected, Behind him, Finn's jaw twitched. His mouth pressed into a thin line, but he still didn't speak. He didn't step forward. He didn't apologize. He just stood there, shadowed by the man who had clearly taught him how to fight. Only when the odds were stacked in his favor. Anya leaned forward slightly in her chair. "I'm not scared of you," she said. "And if you think showing up here is going to stop me from telling the truth, you really don't understand who you're dealing with." The man stared for a moment longer, then glanced over at Lena. Whatever he saw in her eyes made him pause. He stepped back without another word, nodded to his son, and turned toward the car. Finn followed. He glanced back once, just for a second, but Anya had already turned away. By the time the SUV pulled out of the lot and disappeared around the corner, the wind had picked up, tugging at the edges of her coat and rustling the dry leaves that skittered across the asphalt. Lena stood beside her in silence. "You okay?" she asked finally. Anya nodded, eyes forward. "I'm just tired of people thinking they can scare me." Lena gave a quiet laugh under her breath. "They're scared," she said. "That's why they showed up." And neither of them said it out loud, but they both felt it deep and certain, like a wire pulled tight between them. This wasn't the end, but it was no longer a fight for survival. It was a fight they were starting to control. By the following week, things stopped being manageable for the school district. Their strategy of silence of controlled statements, deflective language, and shallow gestures no longer worked. Every time they tried to issue a neutral press release, it was torn apart in the comment sections. Dissected by local news panels, mocked on social media. Every delay looked like guilt. Every carefully worded sentence that failed to name the boys directly was seen for what it was, cowardice wrapped in bureaucracy. But it wasn't just the video anymore. A new recording surfaced, this one older, grainy audio from a classroom posted anonymously, but it was unmistakably Finn's voice laughing, calling Anya deadweight under his breath, while another boy whispered something too low to hear, followed by stifled laughter. A teacher had clearly been in the room, but said nothing. You could hear the dry erase marker squeaking on the board in the background while it all happened. The clip spread faster than the first, because now it wasn't just the cruelty. It was the cover-up. People started speaking out. A former student posted a long thread about how she'd been harassed her senior year, and the school had investigated, but told her not to ruin anyone's future. Another mentioned Silas getting caught with a bottle of liquor in his gym bag and walking out of detention 2 days later with no mark on his record. A boy shared that Reese had broken his glasses in the locker room during freshman year, and the coach told him not to report it unless he wanted to stir the pot. It was all coming loose, and the boys' families knew it. The lawyer representing the Vance family received an unexpected call, an offer for early settlement with no admission of wrongdoing, but a promise to discuss financial compensation and systemic reform. The number they floated was large enough to tempt silence, enough to make everything disappear at least publicly. But Lena and Anya weren't interested in vanishing. Their lawyer turned it down. Instead, she went public with the fact that a settlement offer had been made without accountability. That same evening, a televised debate aired between two legal analysts, one of whom read a portion of the offer aloud on air. The backlash was swift. Parents from the school began calling for administrative resignations. A petition demanding the firing of Vice Principal Davies reached 25,000 signatures in a single weekend. Disability rights organizations began planning a rally in front of the school district building. Reporters now waited daily outside campus. And in the middle of it all, Anya stayed steady. She went to class every day. She spoke when asked. She gave a short interview for a national podcast. She answered a question at a town hall. She didn't yell. She didn't cry. She didn't retreat. She just kept showing up. Lena reinstated, but choosing not to return to the school, kept working behind the scenes, organizing interviews, sending statements, coordinating with advocacy groups who were now treating Anya as a figurehead in a growing movement far beyond their city. For every headline the boys' families tried to control, Lena made sure a louder, truer one replaced it. One evening, Anya sat at the table scrolling through her phone when she saw a new post. A boy from school, one of the quiet ones who had never said a word during all the bullying, had posted a short video of himself staring into the camera. "I should have helped her," he said. "I saw what they did. I didn't do anything, but now I'm going to." He shared the link to the petition. He tagged the district. He named Finn. Anya didn't know how to feel at first, but when she looked across the table and saw Lena watching her, the corner of her sister's mouth lifting into something small and proud, she realized something simple but powerful. They were being heard, not because they begged for attention, not because they played nice, but because they didn't stop. And now the truth had a momentum of its own. It was no longer just about what had been done. It was about what came next. The change came slowly then, all at once. It started with the hearing notices letters sent to the families of Finn Silas and Reese informing them that formal expulsion procedures had begun. The school board had voted unanimously to move forward after reviewing the compiled evidence, witness statements, and public outcry. The district made the announcement in a short press release just before the weekend to soften the impact. But the news didn't soften anything. Reporters got the story before the school could control it. Within hours, headlines flooded local and regional outlets. School moves to expel students involved in disability abuse incident. Photos of the boys from last year's sports banquet began circulating online. In some, they looked smug, arms around each other's shoulders, trophies in hand. In others, they looked younger, almost harmless. But the captions under the images told a different story now. The comment sections weren't kind, and while their parents still tried to spin it, interviewing through lawyers, issuing statements about due process and forgiveness, the community had turned. Coaches distanced themselves, alumni stopped defending them. Even some of the teachers who had been silent started quietly voicing support for what the Vances had done, as if the winds had shifted just enough to make truth feel safe to stand beside. For the first time since the fight, Anya felt like she could breathe inside those school walls. The tension didn't vanish completely. There were still stares in the hallway, whispers that trailed behind her classmates who avoided eye contact or spoke too carefully. Like the truth might still be radioactive, but the fear had changed shape. It wasn't lodged in her chest the way it had been before. It didn't grip her hands when she turned corners or sit on her shoulders when she passed certain lockers. It had moved to them. Finn stopped coming to school 2 days before his hearing. No explanation. No one said it out loud, but everyone knew Silas and Reese followed soon after. Their lockers were emptied one morning before the first bell. Someone said their parents had requested early withdrawals. Someone else said they'd been told not to show up. The principal released another statement, short, cautious. "We remain committed to a safe learning environment for all students. We take allegations of harassment seriously and will continue to uphold our policies." It sounded tired, now too late. Lena read it and didn't even bother to respond. Instead, she focused on preparing for the next step. The lawsuit was gaining traction. National organizations had started calling. Disability rights leaders wanted to meet. Anya? Civil rights groups were amplifying the story. A local university invited the sisters to speak at an upcoming panel on equity in education. Their mother sat them down at the kitchen table one evening after dinner, her voice calm but firm. "You've already changed things," she said, "and I'm proud of both of you, but just make sure you're still living your lives. Don't let this take everything." Lena nodded, serious as always, but Anya just smiled. "Maybe it already did," she said. "But now we're the ones deciding what to do with it." That weekend, Anya returned to the gym where Lena trained. It had been a long time since she'd watched her sister move like that. Controlled, sharp, deliberate. Lena sparred carefully, never showing off, but always steady, always precise. After the session ended, she handed Anya a pair of gloves, smaller, padded, soft. "You don't have to hit hard," she said. "Just hit smart." Anya slipped them on. The weight didn't scare her anymore, because now she understood what it meant to stand your ground, even when you were sitting. The rally took place on a cold Saturday morning just outside the district headquarters. And by the time Anya and Lena arrived, wrapped in coats and scarves against the wind, the sidewalk was already filled. Signs bobbed above heads in steady rhythm. "Protect disabled students." We stand with Anya. Accountability isn't optional. Some were handwritten, others printed by local organizations who had shown up not just to support, but to demand. There were parents and students, activists and teachers, legal advocates and neighbors all gathered in a quiet but powerful show of force, their presence speaking what their voices soon would. At the edge of the gathering, a makeshift podium had been set up near the front steps of the building. Behind it, a banner stretched across the stone wall. No more silence, no more excuses. Lena stepped up first, her voice calm and measured, cutting through the cold without needing to shout. She spoke about schools as institutions of trust, how they could no longer expect students to endure harm in silence while adults turned away. She spoke about systems that only moved when forced, and the strength it took to be the one doing the pushing. Then she stepped back and Anya wheeled forward. She didn't look at the crowd first. She took a slow breath, her hands resting on the podium, steady and sure. Then she raised her eyes and spoke. Not loud, not theatrical, just clear, like she was no longer asking permission to be heard. "I didn't file a lawsuit because I wanted revenge," she said. "I filed it because I didn't want this to happen to the next girl in the chair, or the next boy, or anyone who gets laughed at and ignored until they finally break." The crowd was quiet, listening. "I filed it," she continued, "because no one should have to get hurt, get filmed, get dragged across the floor, and still wonder if they'll be believed. No one should have to lose their sister from school just to get someone to notice." Applause didn't explode. It rolled in like a rising tide, steady and strong, carrying warmth in its sound. She paused only briefly before finishing, "And I'm not going anywhere until the people who failed me are the ones who have to answer for it." That night, her words were quoted on the evening news, and the lawsuit became national. Within days, media coverage spread far beyond the city. Major outlets published features with headlines like "Student Files Landmark Disability Discrimination, Case Against School District," and "Sisters at the Center of Civil Rights Storm." Refused to back down. Interviews were requested from national talk shows. A segment aired on a late-night special. The legal filing itself, Vance via Northwood School District Board of Education, was circulated in advocacy networks, used as an example of how accountability could no longer be buried under red tape and silence. The district's lawyers tried to get ahead of the damage. They reached out again with a revised settlement offer, but this time it wasn't buried in disclaimers. It included a formal acknowledgement of wrongdoing, a detailed action plan to reform staff training, and a substantial financial offer that would fund both Anya's continued care and a new disability equity program that would bear her name. This time, the Vances listened. Their attorney went through the offer carefully. Lena asked every question she could think of. Anya said nothing for most of the meeting, just sat quietly watching her name printed across the paperwork, the shape of her story now etched into official documents. "I'll agree," she finally said, "if they sign it in public." The attorney smiled, and the district did. The final agreement was signed in a public session, not behind closed doors. Cameras were allowed, journalists attended. The superintendent read a statement acknowledging the district's failure to protect Anya Vance from sustained harassment and abuse, recognizing Lena Vance for stepping in when adults had failed and committing to long-term systemic reform. It wasn't just a win, it was a shift. And afterward, Anya didn't celebrate. She didn't cry. She just sat with her sister on the front steps of the building. The crowd thinning behind them, reporters drifting away, the sky softening to a pale gray. As the day settled down, Lena handed her a bottled water and sat beside her in silence. "You did it," Lena said quietly. Anya shook her head just slightly. "We did it." And while neither of them said it out loud, both understood the same thing in that moment. The story wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about what came next, what they'd build with the space they'd carved out, and how many more would follow the path they'd forced open. The dust never settled completely, but it did begin to clear. The news cycle moved on after a while, shifting its spotlight to another city, another story. The cameras left the school parking lot. The reporters stopped calling as often, and the comment threads grew quieter. But for Anya, the silence wasn't the kind that erased what happened. It was the kind that made space for something new to take root. She still wheeled down the same hallways, past the same lockers, sat through the same classes. But the weight had changed. It no longer pressed against her shoulders or curled in her stomach like it used to. People still watched her sometimes, but the looks were different now. Curious, careful, even respectful in a way that didn't feel forced. A few students who had never spoken before now stopped her to ask questions about advocacy projects. Some asked about joining the mentorship group she was building with the help of a local nonprofit. One teacher asked if she'd be willing to help redesign parts of the school's disability access plan. They wanted to hear from her, not out of pity, but because they had started to understand she knew what they didn't. She hadn't expected to enjoy that feeling. But she did. She liked the planning, the clarity, the way ideas took shape on paper and turned into something real. She liked knowing that her voice could shift, a conversation change, a policy open a door. For the first time since the accident, she felt useful in a way that wasn't just about surviving the day. She wasn't clinging to the edge of things anymore. She was building something inside them, and she wasn't alone. Lena kept showing up not at school, but everywhere else that mattered. She trained in the mornings and helped Anya in the afternoons. They met with community organizers, they drafted proposals, they planned summer workshops. It wasn't always easy, but it was theirs. Every meeting, every late-night email, every small win, they were stitching something back together, something stronger than what had been lost. One afternoon, as they sat at the kitchen table, sorting through a stack of notes and program flyers, their mother stepped into the room, holding her phone. She looked at Anya, then gently placed the phone down with the screen facing up. A headline stretched across it in bold black text. 3 former students disqualified from university admissions following expulsion review. Anya read it slowly. Beneath the title, the article explained how the colleges Finn Silas and Reese had been accepted to had rescinded their offers after learning of the full extent of the harassment and the terms of their expulsion. Their athletic scholarships had been pulled. At least one of the boys had tried to appeal, citing unfair media influence, but the decision held. There were no photos in the article, no quotes from the boys or their families, just the facts laid out plain and final. Anya stared at the screen for a long time. Lena didn't say anything. She didn't need to. Eventually, Anya looked up. "I thought it would feel different," she said softly. "Does it?" her mother asked. "I don't know," Anya said. "It doesn't feel like revenge, just like the end of a chapter." Lena nodded. "That's all it ever needed to be." They sat there a while longer, not celebrating, not gloating, just letting it settle. The weight of justice, when it finally landed, didn't come with fireworks or shouts. It came quiet, steady, heavy in the right places. Later that evening, Anya wheeled out to the back porch with a blanket wrapped around her legs and a notebook in her lap. She scribbled notes for the next meeting topics for discussion, speakers to invite questions she wanted to ask. The porch light buzzed above her. The wind was cool, but not bitter. For the first time in a long time, she didn't feel like she was chasing after a version of her life she had lost. She felt like she was finally living the one she had grown into, and it didn't scare her anymore.